This is episode 95 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and my guest tonight is making his debut on the podcast, Jay from Oil City Dynasty on Twitter. Jay, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Eric, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, it's been almost 48 hours now since the Edmonton Oilers eliminated the rival Vancouver Canucks and punched their ticket to the Western Conference Final. And as a couple diehard Edmonton Oilers fans, we couldn't have asked for a better way to cap off May long weekend, could we?
That was the best, man. I was getting pretty worried going into Game 7, but the boys pulled her off.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard-fought series, and there were 6 one-goal games, but ultimately, I thought the Oilers were the better team throughout. I had them winning in 6 games. They ended up needing 7, but all that matters is that they're moving on to the next round, and I can't wait for the West Final to get started tomorrow night.
Absolutely, I'm pumped.
And tonight we'll be recapping the Oilers' Game 7 victory over the Canucks. But Jay, since you're a first-time guest on the show, I'd like to start by just hearing a little about your own background as a fan of this team. So let's just start at the beginning. When did you start following the NHL, and how did you become an Oilers fan?
Literally, my first memories, like ever, as a baby, include the Oilers. I was born during their inaugural season in the NHL. And so I remember sitting on the couch with my dad and my mom as, a 2 or 3 year old. And I would always ask my dad, which one's Gretzky? Which one's Gretzky? And he'd say, the one with 2 9s on his back now. Shut up and let me watch the game. So it's been a lifelong thing, growing up in the 80s in Northern Alberta. It's just natural.
You were just basically born into it then.
Absolutely. It's all I can remember.
And is your entire family all Oilers fans too?
Pretty much. I think I have one uncle who is a Leafs fan, okay. But pretty much everyone else is diehard. Both my grandparents, both parents, cousins, all pretty hardcore.
So then you were born during the inaugural season. So can you actually remember their first Stanley Cup win, which was it was just 2 days or 3 days ago was the 40th anniversary of their first cup in 1984.
I'd be lying if I said I remember 84, but I definitely remember 87, 88, and 90. I knew as a 4-year-old, all I knew was Gretzky, and all I knew is that we won all the time, but specific memories aren't quite there.
I mean, hard to expect anyone that age to have too many vivid memories, but it's great that you actually can remember some of the cup years. I was born in 1989, so at the tail end of the dynasties, I can say I was alive for one cup. But
there you go.
But my early.
A lot of Leafs fans can't say that.
Yeah, true enough. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Oilers fans that are under 30. Well, all Oilers fans under 30 actually now that can't say that as well. But hopefully that will be ending in about a month here. So, but yeah, my earliest Oilers memories are basically that 97 Cup run, or playoff run, I should say, where the Oilers upset the Dallas Stars in the first round. And I was 8 years old at the time. So that was really when it started for me as a fan of this team. But for you, it's great that you can remember at least some of the Gretzky years.
Absolutely. I remember his last game. This was, VCR times. And for some reason, I needed to record that game. And, that tape was long lost. But, as an 8-year-old, I don't know if there was, a sense that I got from people around me that this was a really important game, that it could be Gretzky's last game. But I remember as an 8-year-old having to record that.
So I'm going to assume that Wayne Gretzky is one of your answers here, but who were your favorite Oilers players when you were growing up and why?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Growing up in Northern Alberta, as I said, in the 80s, Gretzky was God. He's the best there was at the time, and he's the greatest of all time. But also there's Bill Ranford. That 90 Cup run was amazing. Conn Smythe winner, and just the style, the big double pad stack, the big glove saves, and he was just cool, and then came along Cujo. And so, I was pretty lucky to have some pretty awesome guys to cheer for. Messier, Curry, Igor Ulanov.
Yeah. A little more of an obscure one with Ulanov there, but yeah, I'm sure he had a good amount of fans in Edmonton too. So when Messi was traded in '91, you would have been a young kid at the time. Do you remember the impact of that move?
Oh, absolutely. It signaled the end of the dynasty. Once Messi was gone, there was no more cups. We had a really dry run there in the early 90s, and it was tough. And actually, during that time, my obsession kind of waned for a couple of years, and I really kind of got into basketball and the Charlotte Hornets, actually, oddly enough. And so there was some meek times there, but it was still always there, kind of in the background. But after Messier left, it kind of dimmed down for a year or so.
Well, Oilers fans were spoiled for such a long time. I mean, the first 13 years in the league, they made the playoffs every year. In a span of 10 seasons, they went to the conference final at least 8 times, won 5 Stanley Cups. So to go from that to 4 straight years out of the playoffs until it sort of got back going again in '97, it was like a second wind for the organization where even though they weren't a contender anymore, they were a consistent playoff team for the next several years.
That scrappy little low seed.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about that a little later in the show. But what do you remember about your first Oilers game at the old Northlands Coliseum?
Oh, man, I remember so much about it. It was May 6th, 1992, actually. It was the last time that the Oilers faced the Canucks in the playoffs. And it was a big deal for me because being a child of a divorced parents and a single mother, and we lived 6 hours away. So for her to, get me to a playoff game and sitting second row right by the playoff box, or the penalty box, sorry. And there's a lot of little things in the pregame. I remember Kevin Lowe, he wasn't shooting on the net, but he was shooting at the boards, warming up right in front of me. And it just sounded like a shotgun blast every time that puck hit the boards. And I just remember it being so loud and almost kind of annoyed by it. But, it was pretty cool. And that game, Joe Murphy scored a hat trick. The Oilers won 5-2. And I was really excited to see Pavel Bure. That was his rookie season. And that was pretty cool. And, yeah, there was a lot of firsts for me, and it was a really good day, and I remember it well.
I mean, that's a memorable first game, especially for it to be a playoff game too.
Yeah, where we're from, like I live 6 hours away, so if you're gonna do something, you gotta make sure you do it good.
Yeah. And in the years to come, like you said, it's good that you did get to go to a playoff game then, because they didn't make it back for 5 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just attended my first playoff game 2 years ago. It was Game 1 against the Kings, and unfortunately they didn't win that night. Thankfully, they still won the series. But, I mean, I've been to many Oilers games in my life, but nothing compares to that first playoff game. The energy in the building and just seeing how the fans rallied around the team. It was something that I had to experience for myself in person.
Honestly, it's unreal, and I have goosebumps just thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to attend a game in the conference final next week, but I think we know how expensive tickets would be to get into that game.
Oh, I've looked. It's pretty steep. I think I'll be missing out this year.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with watching from home. At least we still get to watch our team in the conference final. And how often do you try to see the Oilers play live now?
The last year or two, it's been only about once a year. Probably for about 10 years prior to that, I would try to make it to about 4 or 5 games, depending on circumstance and all that, and work schedules and kid schedules and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Especially if you're not living in the city too. And I mean, for me, I live in Saskatoon, so I'm a 5-hour drive away, but I try to come out about 4 times a year for games. I was lucky enough to catch 3 games on one trip this year. So that made it so I could get into a few extras, and went to the Heritage Classic in October, which was a really memorable one too. So yeah, it's
the one year, and that was a good one. I was happy that was the one game I made it to this year.
Nice. Yeah, it was awesome. I was at the one in Winnipeg about 7.5 years ago too. And I think they did a great job of hosting it. Edmonton did too. The one thing I would have liked to have seen them do at the Heritage Classic this year, and it sort of ties into what we're talking about, is having players from an alumni game with players from the late 90s and early 2000s. I think that's an era of Oilers hockey that needs to be celebrated a little more. And we did see that with some of the players from the 03 team that were out on the ice for the pregame ceremony. But I mean, the opportunity to see Doug Wade, Bill Guerin, Anson Carter, Ryan Smith, Alish Hemsky, having some of those guys out there again, I think that would have been a really cool alumni game.
That would have been awesome. I understand the logistics of it. Sometimes may not be the easiest thing to do, and getting guys in. But hopefully with the Ring of Honor, we'll see more of those guys in the upcoming years and get to celebrate them as they deserve.
That's true. I think, and one thing I did hear is that they were worried about the ice condition by having too many games on that sheet in one weekend, but it's been done enough times before, and I think that they probably could have done it, and it would have been really cool to see, the Ryan Smith-led Oilers against the Jerome McGinley-led Flames.
That would have been awesome. That would have had some good memories from my 20s for sure.
Oh yeah, do that on the Saturday afternoon, and then have the Heritage Classic actual game on the Sunday.
That would have been perfect. Yeah.
And what is your favorite memory of watching the Oilers, either on TV or live in person?
Man, I've been lucky. I've seen a lot of cool games live. I was at Game 7 against LA a couple of years ago, the series you're at, and that was a major high. The Cassian game in 2017, I was lucky enough to be in the building against the Sharks on that one. The last game at Rexall, that was pretty sweet. Actually, I had pneumonia the week leading up to that. I was hospitalized.
Oh, geez.
And I basically had to lie to the doctors to get released so I could make it to that game. And I don't regret it at all. But I'm thinking if I had to, the live games, probably Game 7 against LA. And then one game that I watched on TV that really stands out was during the Decade of Darkness and Gagne's 8-point game. Yeah. I remember literally jumping on the couch. I was probably a 34-year-old man at that point. I don't remember the exact year that game was.
It was February 2nd, 2012.
Okay, so I was 32 then. So, yeah, I was literally jumping on my couch.
Yeah, like it's a memorable one too. And Gagne's an 89 born like me, and always have been a fan of him since day one. I would love it if he could get into a playoff game. The sentimental side of me for sure wants it to happen. Some will say that he is probably only going to get into a game if there's multiple injuries, because he seems to be the 14th forward on the depth chart right now. But I mean, after 17 years in the league and so much of that time with the Oilers, it would be great to see him finally get to play in that first playoff game in Edmonton.
Absolutely, and especially if it happened to be in the finals, he went totally beast mode. He thought it was, could be the end of the road for him. Put in 2 goals in an important game and ride off into the sunset like that. That's storybook ending, considering how much hard luck he's had during his playing career and the lack of playoff success and whatnot.
I mean, he scored 2 goals in a game against Dallas earlier this season, so it could be an omen that it's time to get him back in there.
Maybe he's got the hands.
Yeah, but that game you mentioned with Gagne back in 2012, a very memorable one too, and obviously getting to see the final game at Rexall Place. I was watching that game on TV, just glued to the screen, seeing all these legends be brought out onto the ice one after the other. And of course, Gretzky came out last and brought the house down with probably the loudest ovation of the night. But still, just an unbelievable way to send off that building. And it's pretty cool that you were there. I hope you have some pictures and videos from that night.
I do. It was surreal. Actually, I have a picture. There's that famous picture of Gretzky and McDavid in their orange jerseys together, and actually I have that framed on my wall. And I have a picture of that picture being taken. I took a picture of that from behind. So that's kind of a neat thing to see. And another thing I remember about that day is, or the end of the game, and it was me and my stepson were there, and security basically had to more or less, well, not push us out, but gently, guide us
encourage you to make your way to the exit.
Wanted to be the last guy in that building, and I wasn't the last, but I was one of the handful of last fans in that building, and I'm so happy I did.
That's pretty cool that you were able to hang on as long as you could and just soak up those last few moments of such a historic building where the Oilers set many NHL records and won 4 of their 5 Stanley Cups. So, yeah, that would have been a memorable night. And just before we move on, that game against the Kings where the Oilers won and Cody Ceci gets the first goal of the game, which was the series winner. McDavid gets the insurance marker late in the third. What was the building like when Connor put that puck in to seal the deal?
Once again, I have goosebumps. I have never heard a building so loud. I have never been so loud. My beautiful girlfriend, she was with me. I've never seen her so loud. It was electric. That's all you can say. And, you could watch the replays and nothing can, duplicate that. It was pretty awesome.
It was. And you have to remember, that was the Oilers' first playoff series win in 5 years. So they had to break that trend after losing in the first round several years. And it was frustrating to get knocked out by the Blackhawks and the Jets and to finally get over the hump. And then they obviously went to the conference final that year too. So it was a deep run for them. And now getting back there this year, it's probably going to be even better because their odds look like they have a good chance to go even further than they did in 2022. All right, let's break down Game 7 between the Oilers and Canucks now. And after keeping their season alive with a decisive 5-1 win at Rogers Place in Game 6, the Oilers headed back on the road looking to knock off the Canucks in their building for Game 7, and the Oilers scored 3 goals in the second period and held off a late push from the Canucks to win the game by a score of 3-2 and advance to the Western Conference Final for the second time in the past 3 years. Jay, those final 8 minutes were more tense than they needed to be, weren't they?
Oh man, it was brutal. So I have my little text group, that we text about the Oilers pretty much on a daily basis, the Blue Ribbon Boys. Hey guys. Anyways, it was in the second intermission. I kind of jokingly said, "Hey, time to start the wave." And my one buddy Greg, who's a little bit more on the cautious side, he's like, "Don't you dare!" Awful idea. And I just said it jokingly, but Greg usually can sense these things when they're about to happen. And the first goal went in, and I was like, "No, we're still good. We're still good." And then that second goal went in, and I was like, "Oh no, here we go again." Flashes of 2017 and Vegas last year, and I'm like, "This can't happen again." And I was just standing, along with the rest of oil country, just probably standing and pacing in the living room, but still, it was good feelings, and they pulled her out.
Yeah, I think Oilers fans have been conditioned to that. And if you just read the timeline, I don't know what your Twitter was like, but when I looked at mine, there were a few fans saying things like, even when it's 3-0 with 10 minutes left in the game, I don't feel completely safe yet because we've seen leads evaporate in the past. But I mean, the Oilers were in control for the majority of that game, and they were absolutely dominating them through at least 45 minutes. Edmonton outshot Vancouver 29-17, but it was 20-4 at one point, and they built up that 3-0 lead, and thankfully it was enough of a cushion to get the win. And even though the Oilers blew a 3-goal lead in Game 1 in that same building, and the Canucks have pulled off several comebacks in the playoffs so far, I felt confident after getting that third goal that they were going to win Game 7 because the Canucks really couldn't get anything going offensively for most of that game. And even when they did get chances in the offensive zone, they missed the net on a lot of them or had pucks roll off their stick in the slot. The best look they had all night was the Ilya Mikheyev partial break, and he hit the side of the net. Phil DiGiuseppe also had a clear chance in front and missed the net too. So obviously we're going to look at things from an Oilers perspective, though, and I thought that as a team, they did a great job of taking away shooting lanes and deflecting pucks out of danger. And they really did a good job of keeping the Canucks to the outside. The Oilers were just more than happy to let them pass the puck around the perimeter, and the Canucks didn't really get many quality chances from the middle. So to me, it was a lot like Game 5 against the Kings in the last round. They showed great composure and attention to detail in an elimination game and closed out a team that had them basically, one game away from being out previously. So you look at the mistakes they made near the end of the game. Yeah, it probably raised the heart rate of everyone in oil country, but we saw a very savvy timeout taken by head coach Chris Knobloch to settle down the troops. And even after the Canucks cut the deficit to 1, and the Oilers really didn't allow a single shot after that. So from top to bottom, I thought they had a very mature road win in a pressure-packed situation.
It's a veteran team, and you know what? The coach is doing the right things. You mentioned the timeout. We've had some really good coaches here, but some of, in the past few years, some of the decision making and, the lack of timeouts or, certain line changes or line combos or,
even in Game 1, you could argue that Knobloch should have taken that timeout when the Canucks tied at 4-4, and he didn't. And this time we did see him do that. And obviously, like I said, it paid off because the Oilers were able to shut the Canucks down after that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before the Oilers opened the scoring early in the second period, they killed off a 4-minute high sticking penalty late in the first where the Canucks didn't register a single shot on goal. Jay, Edmonton's penalty kill has been outstanding throughout the playoffs, but that kill might have been the most crucial part of the game.
When they killed that and, they didn't give up a single shot on a 4-minute, double minor, that's when I truly felt the game was won. Vancouver didn't have it. They were clearly missing Besser. They've been missing Peterson the whole series, even though he's been there. These are the guys that they're going to be paying to perform, and they're not there. And once they killed that off, I knew it was won. And credit to, is it Mark Stewart who runs the penalty kill?
Yeah. Because
you know what? The special teams, like you could switch out the head coach, but the special teams have been awesome, So, and it's to the point where, I remember a couple of years ago, as soon as we'd get a penalty kill, it's like, oh no, like here we go.
It felt like a goal was coming.
Yeah, and it's just so there's so much confidence. I have so much confidence in the penalty kill right now. It's something that could lead to a cup.
Yeah, and I've talked about this on a past episode too, but I think the fact that the Oilers have a coach that's running the penalty kill that was a recent player in the league, because he hasn't been retired for that long, I think that does help a lot, because he would be familiar with a lot of these players that the Oilers are trying to shut down, because he would have penalty killed against them. And not to take anything away from a guy like Dave Manson, who was there before, but he's been retired for more than 20 years. And I think having more of a young mind who has been through the rigors and the battles of going up against these top attackers in the league, I think that really has helped.
You know what? I never really thought of it that way, and that's a great point.
Yeah, and that extended power play for them really could have made it a different game. Ryan McLeod, like I said, he took that 4-minute high sticking penalty with just under 4 minutes left in the first. So the best we could hope for is that they were going to be on the kill for the rest of the period. And that's ultimately what happened. And think of it, if the Canucks would have buried a goal or two on that man advantage, then they might have had the momentum swing in their favor. And not only did the Canucks generate no shots on that power play, but Connor Brown had a shorthanded breakaway in the final minute that could have sent the Oilers into the room with a 1-0 lead. But Archer Seelov came up with one of several key saves on that chance that denied the Oilers getting the early lead. But even though Brown didn't... Sorry, go ahead.
A big thing with that too is you got to think of the crowd and the energy that it sucks out of the building when you don't have a shot on a 4-minute, power play. We know, or we were just talking about how Game 7 crowds like that can, really energize a team, and they took the life out of their crowd with that power play.
And even though Brown didn't score, he was solid on that penalty kill. And for the Oilers to survive that power play and still be tied after 1, I think that was a huge boost for the team.
No, for sure.
And Leon Draisaitl has been an absolute horse in this series. He's tallied 14 points in 7 games and extended his playoff point streak to 12 games with an assist on Ryan Nugent-Hopkins' series-winning goal. Jay, Draisaitl was easily the best player in this series, wasn't he?
Yes. I would almost want to put Bouchard in that conversation as well. But yeah, like Draisaitl in the playoffs, he just controls the game, and it doesn't matter what condition his body's in. You know, you've heard Bob say a lot, you know, Jason Smith had the pain threshold of a cadaver.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure Draisaitl does as well, because, you know, we don't know what's up with him right now. But, you know, there was obviously something earlier in that season.
He played through a high ankle sprain in the playoffs 2 years ago. And he had, 17 points in 5 games against the Flames in the second round. When you're able to have that type of production while only playing on one leg, I think that pretty much says it all right there.
He's unreal. Like, we're so lucky to have him, and I hope we have him for, you know, well beyond this year. Who knows if that'll happen, but man, I'm going to be so friggin' sad if he's not an Oiler, you know, 2 or 3 years down the road.
I mean, it's all speculation, but I've never had any doubt that McDavid and Draisaitl weren't going to spend their entire careers in Edmonton. And maybe that's just me being the eternal optimist, but there's only one place in the league where those guys can play together. One team in the league that can fit them under the cap, and that's with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yes, and that's the huge advantage. And, you know, we're so lucky that, you know, it's not a Shaq and Kobe situation. You know, these dudes love it.
They're best friends, and aside from that, they know that they're never going to get to play with a player as good as each other wherever else they go.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're totally right on that.
And while Game 7 wasn't his best game of the series, he still is the clear-cut front-runner to win the Conn Smythe Trophy, in my opinion. I mean, he leads the league with 24 points in 12 playoff games. He has 9 multi-point games. And as I already mentioned, he kept his point streak alive with a helper on the game-winning goal. He now has the 7th longest point streak in NHL history from the start of the playoffs. And with the assist, Draisaitl passed Charlie Huddy for 7th on the Oilers' all-time playoff assist list with 62. And in Game 6, he became the 3rd fastest player in NHL history to record 100 playoff points, behind only Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. So some pretty impressive company there. And it's hard to imagine that on a team with Connor McDavid that anyone could be better than him. But McDavid said it himself in his post-game media avail that on many nights, Draisaitl is the best player in the world, especially in the playoffs when he always seems to take his game up a few notches. And it was just over a year ago when Draisaitl said it's cup or bust for this group in 2024. And right now, he's the engine that's driving the Oilers offensively. And when you have that type of a player as your second-line center behind McDavid, that's going to make the Oilers a very tough out for any team they face this spring.
For sure. No, there's no doubt about that.
And you see that he's even had some new line mates recently, right? I mean, with Henrique being out, they've had to juggle things a bit. How have you liked Dylan Holloway moving up and playing with Draisaitl?
It's a breakout performance for Dylan Holloway. That goal he had the other game, like, you know, it made you jump out of your seat. All he needs is some injury luck, because he hasn't had that go his way in his career. And, you know, some confidence. And he's building confidence. And you're never going to see him in the AHL again, I don't think.
Oh, no.
Clearly something major's got to happen for, you know, that to kick in. But Dylan Holloway's arrived, and it happened in the spring of 2024.
Yeah, I think he's done all that he can do at that level. He's been a point-per-game player in multiple seasons now. He's too good for that league. I think that he's trying to make the case even that he wants to be a permanent spot in the top 6. And going into next season, I expect him to be pushing for a regular spot, either on Draisaitl or McDavid's line, right from the start of camp. And if you want to have the McDavid line stay together, because I think it was the best line in hockey all season of McDavid, Hyman, and Nugent-Hopkins, then that spot on the left side next to Draisaitl is open. And Evander Kane can either move to the other wing, or, you know, if Henrique does come back, who knows if he resigns or not. But Holloway is a guy who's going to be on a cheap deal. You drafted him 14th overall for a reason. This is a skilled player who needs to be played with skilled players. And I think that having him in the bottom six is a waste of his abilities. You want to have this guy driving play and up there. And if he's a contributing member on the second line, then that's pretty much exactly what you expected for him when he was drafted.
So do you think the emergence of Holloway, given the contract situations, the cap situations, does Holloway make Kane expendable?
It depends, because like Evander Kane was playing through an injury for most of the season and he still had 22 goals. You have to ask yourself, are you confident that you can replace his 22 goals next season? And if they think that trading Evander Kane and using that money to re-sign Henrique, that they can assure that they're going to get at least that much, because I think in a healthy year, Kane could probably put up 30. And unfortunately, he hasn't played a fully healthy year in any of his time in Edmonton. So I would say you're probably banking on Holloway being, you would like to think, in the 15 to 20 goal range next season, especially if he is playing higher in the lineup. Can Henrique also do that? I mean, he's scored 20 goals, I think, 6 times in his career, 6 or 7 times. So you'd hope that even though he's north of 30, that he could probably give you that type of production as well. I still would be a little hesitant to do it. And you have to remember, Kane has a no-trade clause that kicks in, I believe, in February of 2025. And that only secures his spot with the team through the deadline and all of the last year on the contract. But I think that they would probably only do that if they felt that they were confident they could get the same amount of goals out of the guys that I just mentioned. And I'm not sure that they're 100% confident that Holloway is ready to replace everything Evander Kane can bring right now.
No, and fair enough, because there's that, physical aspect. And,
well, that's the other thing, too. You mentioned it right there.
It's, just coming into that. So no, I was just kind of curious because we got the Bouchard contract and stuff that needs to be done. Is that this year or next year? I can't remember.
He's still signed for next year at $3.9 million. We know that his next deal is going to start with a 9. So that's the thing. And the Oilers are then going to have 2 $9 million defensemen on the team. So that's why you need the salary cap to consistently keep going up. And it sounds like now that we're through the pandemic and that there's a new expansion team in the league in Seattle, a new TV deal in the US, that the salary cap should be going up 5% each year, which should be about a $4 million increase. So let's hope that by the time Bouchard's deal is up, because that's also when Draisaitl's deal is up, that the cap has gone up $8 million, and they're going to need that. So at that time, I can see where you would be saying that maybe they have to move out Kane because he would be an aging power forward at the time. And when you're trying to fit humongous contracts under the cap, especially with McDavid only being 1 year away from needing his new deal as well, you see this with contending teams around the league. Eventually, they have to start trimming the fat somewhere around the lineup, sending out good players from their maybe second or third line to try and keep their star players. You have to keep your core intact. And that's why having a guy like Holloway is even more important, because this is a guy who's young, skilled, and on a cheap deal. And that's what the Oilers need more of.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I just kind of brought up the idea of maybe looking at moving Kane, because you got, a lot cheaper replacement in Holloway. And hopefully, ready for the task, because, there is going to be some cap space that's going to need to be moved.
For sure. I think the first thing that will have to happen is obviously hiring a new GM. And that will be Jeff Jackson's number one offseason priority as soon as the season ends, because Ken Holland's deal expires at the end of June. There's already rumors that he might be moving on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, but at the same time, he might be just content to retire, especially if the Oilers win the Cup. Then I think he almost for sure will retire, because at that point, he'll have a 5th ring. He's already in the Hall of Fame. I mean, what more does he need to prove at age 68? So I don't think that he would stick around beyond that if the Oilers do end up winning. But yes, they need to bring in a new GM, and I'm sure that Jeff Jackson, he's a very smart hockey guy, that he probably already has a list of candidates. And I don't want to think too much more about off-season moves because we still have playoff games to get to, but that will be something that I think Oilers fans will be following closely this summer.
Absolutely.
All right, and you mentioned Evan Bouchard, so let's go to him now. He had arguably the best series of his life against the Canucks, picking up 11 points in 7 games. Jay, he's been an excellent offensive defenseman for a couple of years now, but did you ever think he could reach this level?
I hoped he could reach this level. Did I think he would reach what he is right now against that series versus the Canucks? I don't think anybody could have expected that. Just the big knock on him for a long time was, he looks almost too nonchalant out there. Well, now he's calm under pressure. And, he's putting that onto the defensive side. We all knew the offense is there, and now it's just coming in buckets. And, it's a good sign to see. I was really worried at the start of the season. It seemed like he got off to a little bit of a rough start, and especially
his D partner Ekholm was injured in training camp too, so that might have set things back a tad. But
no, for sure.
And those two, what can you say about that pairing together?
When can you think of a better pairing that the Oilers have had? I can't think of any in the last 30 years.
You probably have to go back to Coffey and Huddy back in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, like people can rag on Ken Holland as much as they want. And you know what? I've been guilty of doing some of it. But man, that Ekholm deal, when they gave up Barry, I was just like, ooh, I don't know, along with the two
Some people were unsure if Bouchard was ready to step into that role. And incredibly, he's made the power play even better since taking Barry's spot on it.
Which I don't think any of us thought, was possible for it to get better. We're like, What are you doing? You don't mess with a good thing. Well, he messed with it, but he made it better.
Yeah. It's that was a franchise-altering trade. The Oilers needed a defenseman like Ekholm so badly for years, right? And Bouchard and Ekholm are completely different defensemen. Now, Ekholm still did have 45 points this season with very little power play time. He gets on at the end of the second unit for maybe 30 seconds here or there, but those are even strength points. And for him to have a career year in goals and points at age 32 and be mentoring Bouchard and helping him develop into an elite offensive defenseman. It's just been outstanding. And after putting up 82 points in the regular season, Bouchard's been even better in the playoffs. He's currently third in league scoring behind only Draisaitl and McDavid. He's up to 102 points across the regular season and playoffs, which makes him only the 14th defenseman in NHL history to record 100 points in a season. And perhaps even more impressively, Bouchard is the first defenseman to ever put up 20 points through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. He also scored 2 game-winning goals in the series, and despite playing heavy minutes against the opposition's top attackers, Bouchard hasn't shown many signs of cracking under the weight thus far. And, there's still the odd turnover here or there. And I think his defensive play has been much better than he gets credit for, though, in these playoffs. And his defensive partner, Ekholm, even said as much in one of his post-game interviews earlier this month that Bouchard should be getting credit more for the defensive play that he has and not always just his offensive abilities. And at age 24, I think that we can see he's on his path to becoming a top 10 defenseman in the NHL.
Oh, he's already there. They say, defensemen in their, he's at the age where they really start to get comfortable. They get, they're comfortable in their boots. They know the game. They know the players. They've grown into their bodies. So they're men. Well, he's been a man since he was probably 14.
He's a big kid for sure. Came into the league at, he's already 6'3" when he was drafted. He's definitely filled out his frame for sure. But yeah, he's going to get bigger and stronger over the next few years. And I really think playing with Ekholm, even after Ekholm retires, the lessons he's learned are really going to rub off on him and help him throughout the rest of his career.
Yeah, his maturation really started when he was paired with Duncan Keith.
Yes.
That's really what kicked it off. And then just Ekholm Keith lit the fuse and Ekholm, that bomb went off.
Yeah, having a veteran defenseman with him, and there was a 16-year age difference between Keith and Bouchard. So really having a guy who's been through all the playoff battles, won 3 Stanley Cups, a couple one Conn Smythe Trophy, a couple Norris trophies. I mean, he probably couldn't have asked for a better guy to help shepherd him into the league early in his career.
No, it's been perfect. I can't really think of a guy that would be more suited to play with him other than Ekholm.
Yeah, and I mean, to go right from Keith to Ekholm, there was about I guess you'd say a 5-month gap in the 2022-23 season where he didn't have a veteran with him. In fact, he was the veteran on a pairing with Philip Broberg at times. But just to have him now playing with a guy who's been in the league for over a decade and has the lessons that he can pass along to him. You're seeing this because we have to remember Ekholm's been on a cup run too. He went to the final with Nashville in 2017. And I just think that those two guys complement each other so well. The Oilers are extremely lucky to have them as their top pairing. And they're probably, if they would have just picked up maybe one more defenseman along the way, I mean, funny enough, Chris Tanev, a guy who probably would have been a perfect fit for this team, is going to be playing on the team that the Oilers are going up against in the next round. But if they would have had him, you look at the Oilers' blue line, top to bottom, it would be pretty stacked.
Well, and I think it was one of the Stars analysts today just said that Tanev had a choice between Dallas and Edmonton, and he picked Dallas.
Yeah.
So hopefully, maybe that's a little bit of good bulletin board material for the Oilers.
I mean, it could be. The other thing is, too, the Oilers are more of a rival, and it can be sometimes hard to go from one team to the other. And in fairness, Dallas was the better team in the regular season. So finishing at the top of the conference, it's hard to say he picked the wrong team because I think most, if any player had the chance to go to the number 1 seed, that they would probably take that too. And then sometimes, I think back to Ladislav Smid saying years ago that he had a really tough adjustment going from the Oilers to the Flames. So that could have also played a factor in it too, of Tanev maybe not wanting to come here, especially after the 2022 Battle of Alberta and the playoffs. But I mean, credit to the Oilers too. While the Stars did finish ahead of them in the season, since November 11th, when the Oilers got their game back on track, they were the best team in the league for the past 5 months. Yeah,
and they had 2 very close games with Dallas, if I remember correctly, throughout the season. There was 2 1-goal games, but then they
got blown out in the last one. They lost a 4-3 game at Rogers Place back in early November, and then in February, the Oilers won an overtime game in Dallas. So at least that they have the confidence of saying that we've won a game in their building this year.
Yeah, and they're playing their top, they're peak Oilers right now.
Yeah, without a doubt. All right. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying they're definitely confident going into this series.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins played perhaps the best 2 games of his playoff career in Games 6 and 7 against the Canucks. First off, how great was it for you to see him score the series-winning goal against his hometown team? And secondly, what can you say about his overall impact for these past 2 games?
It's so nice to see. There was times this season where he may not have been getting the breaks, but he always does everything so right. He's always so solid. You never hear anything bad off ice about him. Nuge, he's going to be a lifelong Oiler, and hopefully I'm sure he'll be in the front office when his playing days are done. It was just so awesome to see. And, Vancouver may be his hometown, but Edmonton's his home.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. And just to see him step up in these past 2 games when his team really needed him. I mean, that's just what you expect from a guy who's been with the team for 13 years, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, as I alluded to earlier, a little bit earlier in the season, it seemed like something was missing. And, for him to maybe catch a heater here going into the Western Conference Final, that's best case scenario.
Yeah. I mean, prior to Monday night, I think the biggest goal of his career was the game winner late in Game 3 against the Flames 2 years ago in the playoffs. But I would put this one ahead of it as the biggest goal of his career. I mean, he's a BC kid. It's Game 7 in his home province, and he scores the power play goal to send the Oilers to the conference final. And as a fan favorite and the longest tenured player on the team who endured many tough seasons in Edmonton early in his career, he deserves to have these playoff moments as much as anyone. And he's been excellent so far in the playoffs. He's currently 4th in league scoring with 16 points in 12 games. The Oilers actually have all 4 of the top scorers right now. And he had a goal and 2 assists in Game 6 as well. But it's not just about the offense with him. And yes, I mean, his points were a little down from his career year in 2022-23 when he broke 100 points for the first time. But this year, yes, he was more, I guess, of a two-way player. I mean, that's what his focus has been for years, but you just didn't see the high-end offensive production that we got from him 2 years ago. But like I said, it's not as much about the offense with him. Nuge is a player who touches all areas of the game. You know, he's been an effective penalty killer. He applies good back pressure and is always strong positionally in his own end. And you know, with the Oilers' season on the line, he was relied upon to play big minutes against top competition, I should say, and he delivered for them.
No, you're exactly right. And, you know, it couldn't happen to a better guy. And, you know, as I said before, hopefully he just carries it on, you know, because, you know, even when he's not scoring, as you said, you know, he just does everything else right, you know, on and off the ice.
And you hear his teammates mention that in interviews too. Draisaitl, McDavid will always hype him up and say he might not get his name on the score sheet every single night, but he does so many little things right and always makes the smart play. I think he's outstanding in the bumper spot on the power play because you know that even if he's not the one making the pass to set up that goal on the man advantage, when you put the puck in his hands, you're very confident that he's going to make the right play with it.
Yeah, there's, you know, he's not chucking up the middle to, you know, the opposing team. And to get that guy at the contract that we did for, you know.
He took a pay cut. This was a guy who was heading into UFA, and he took less money than he was making to stay at home. It's extremely rare for a player to be in that situation, their first time as a free agent, and to not only re-up with the team you've been with, but to take less.
A lot worse players than him have made, you know, double of probably what he's making.
Yeah. And I mean, you got Zach Hyman at 5.5, Evander Kane at 5.1, Nugent Hopkins at 5.1. So you're paying just about under $17 million for the three of those guys combined. That's pretty good value.
Yeah, and that needs to happen when you're, you know, paying your top two guys what you're going to be, well, especially with Draisaitl coming up. But yeah.
And I mean, look, we all know what a good shooter Evander Kane is. And just think back to the 5th goal in Game 6 where he rifled the puck in off the draw, right? And the reason he isn't on the power play, despite being such a sniper, is because of what a confident puck handler Nugent Hopkins is.
Exactly. You know, Kane would be number one power play on, you know, 26, 27 other teams in the league.
Very likely, yeah. And I mean, you could argue that it would be nice to have another shooter because, I mean, McDavid obviously is a sniper, but he's typically looking to make the pass on the power play. The number one option they want to go to is Draisaitl for the one-timer. You've got Hyman in front of the net banging in rebounds. You got the Bouche bomb from the point. But Nugent and McDavid are mostly the setup guys. And if you could have another sniper out there, you could argue that maybe that would even be a great value to this team as well. But like I said, whenever McDavid puts the puck down in the corner to Nugent Hopkins and he handles it, he's going to make sure that whether he sends it back to the point or rings it around the boards to Draisaitl or wherever it's going, that he makes the smart play with it. And that's the biggest reason why he'll never be taken off that power play as far as I'm concerned.
No, those guys know where each other's going. You know, they've played enough games together. They've played long enough together. They know.
All right. After sitting for games 4 and 5, Stuart Skinner was back between the pipes for games 6 and 7. And in the final 2 games of the series, Skinner stopped 29 of the 32 shots he faced and earned back-to-back wins. Jay, what did you think of Knobloch's decision to go back to Skinner in net? And do you have more confidence in him now after those last 2 outings?
What Knobloch did, pulling him and then putting him back in, you know, considering how Pickard played, was straight up ballsy. I don't know if a lot of coaches would have done that. And kudos to both Pickard and Skinner for, doing their jobs when called upon. It was absolutely huge. I wasn't 100% sure. Considering how Pickard played this year, I was really, I was like, okay, yeah, because Skinner, there was some downs early, and it was just good to, as I said, it was ballsy on Knoblauch, and I'm happy it turned out the way it did. And when Skinner came back, he didn't have to be tested too much, but he was where he needed to be, and he looked solid.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly there, that he didn't need to make a ton of saves, but he made the saves that he needed to make. And it was a bit of a risky move. I think even putting Pickard in, when you're putting a goalie into a situation like that in Game 4, who's never played a playoff game before, and it's maybe an equally risky move going back to a goalie who has put up subpar numbers in the playoffs so far in his young career in Game 6, but ultimately, I think it was the right decision to give the crease back to Skinner in a must-win situation. He's been the starter all season, and for most of the past 2 seasons, really. And he was a top 10 goalie in the league for several months this winter. So that's the guy who should be in net when facing elimination. He got you to this point, and you should ride with him. And like you said, he didn't have to make a ton of stops over the past 2 games, but he came up with big saves at key moments and allowed his team to win. And that's something he wasn't doing earlier in the series. So I'm hoping that after taking a couple games off to reset, that Skinner can get back to the level he was at for the bulk of the season. And he'll need to be sharp because the Oilers are going up against a formidable opponent in the next round.
I'll fully admit, I wasn't too sure if it was the right move to go back to him. But I'm a guy who can admit when I'm wrong, and I'm really happy I was wrong.
I think the thing is that you look at Pickard, he's an older veteran backup goalie, and you're probably not getting as high of a ceiling with him as Skinner is, but you're probably also not getting as low either of a basement. It's going to be, what you're going to get from Skinner. He's not going to be, what you're going to get from Pickard. He's not going to be spectacular out there, but he's going to make steady saves and just give you just a good, honest effort. And that's why he's been a solid organizational number 3 goalie for most of his career. And probably not the guy that you would want to have in there in that type of a do or die game. But I mean, credit to him. He played over 20 games for the Oilers this season as the backup and was solid through most of them. He had a really good save percentage too. So I am going to give him credit, but still, being put into that situation when you've never played in the playoffs before, that's tough. And you look at Skinner. Last year, he had an excellent rookie season. He was an all-star, fell apart in the playoffs, right? He was pulled 4 times and, didn't have the series he would have liked against Vegas for sure. This year, played better in the series against the Kings in the first round. There were 2 games specifically on the road, games 3 and 4, where I thought he was excellent. But coming into this series, didn't have the type of performances we would have liked. And you don't want to hang it all on the goalie, but I think you can say that if Skinner had played at the level that he was at in the regular season through the first 4 games of this series, they might have swept the Canucks.
He just had to be average,
Yeah.
Or just slightly above. And he's got all the capabilities in the world to be, a top 10 goaltender in this league. If they get top 10 goaltending, this team's going to win.
Oh, yeah.
Multiple cups.
Yeah, a team with as much offensive firepower as they have, if you can give them that. And I've really hoped that he could push his way into being a top 10 goalie. And like I said, if you look at the stats for about a 3 or 4 month period this season, he was in that category. And I mean, it also helps that the Oilers are going on a 16-game winning streak, another 8-game winning streak in there as well. And like I said, the best team through the regular season for all but the first month. So that definitely will boost him up a little bit. But now he's going to be really tested because as good as Vancouver is with their offensive weapons, he's probably going up against a team with even better ones now.
Dallas is loaded. I'm worried, but it definitely can go our way.
Well, let's turn our attention to that series now. And going into the 2024 Western Conference Final between the Edmonton Oilers and Dallas Stars, The Oilers went 1-2-0 against the Stars in the regular season, and this will be the first playoff meeting between these clubs in 21 years. So let's start there, Jay. The Oilers and Stars met in the playoffs 6 times in 7 years between 1997 and 2003. And although the Oilers only won one of those series, they usually gave the Stars all they could handle in those postseason battles. I just want to know, what are the memories that come to mind for you when you think back on that fierce rivalry from more than 2 decades ago?
The main thing that sticks out is obviously the Marchand goal, the Cujo save. But I was lucky enough to go to, it was my second ever game in '98 when they were playing against each other. And they lost 1-0 on a Benoit Hogue goal. I can't remember if it was an overtime goal or late, but I remember just being crushed. And then having my first bar experience in the city afterwards as a young 18-year-old little punk, small town punk, and major eye opener. But those series, they were so, Edmonton, they were just so hard hitting and such an exciting team. I mentioned earlier the scrappy underdog. They were such an easy team to like.
Yeah, and you hear that from any fans who are around for that era, that they sort of were the embodiment of Edmonton. It was just a lunch bucket, hardworking team that didn't have a ton of skill, but Craig McTavish coached them and got every last drop he could out of that group. And I think they probably exceeded expectations and overachieved in some years.
It's really too bad we didn't have a salary cap back then, or we didn't have our current owner back then. If we would have had a current owner,
they wouldn't have lost the. Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have lost all the players. Curtis Joseph left as a free agent in '98 and went to Toronto, but then after that, you saw year after year the Oilers having to trade away their top players from Guerin to way down the line. Because they couldn't afford to keep these guys, and then the guys they would bring in those trades, eventually they couldn't afford to keep them, and they'd get sent out the door too. So it was really frustrating, but. You have to think that you look back on those series, like you would have seen the Stars and Oilers play in '98. That was the second round. They had upset the Colorado Avalanche in the first round. And prior to that year, they upset the Dallas Stars in the first round in '97. So despite being a team that scratched and clawed their way into the playoffs, they knocked off a couple Stanley Cup contenders in back-to-back years.
Absolutely, and it was those series were awesome to watch live. It was some of the most exciting hockey ever.
Yeah, and I think when you think back to, that series, if you talk to hockey fans from that era, I mean, the first round is often the best round of the playoffs, but that Edmonton-Dallas series was one that all hockey fans used to look forward to.
And it seemed to happen every single year. I think it was
6 out of 7 years.
There you go.
And I mean, like you said, the Marchand breakaway goal, that is probably the signature moment of the entire rivalry from an Oilers perspective anyway. And of course, like you mentioned, that the Cujo diving save to deny Joe Nieuwendyk right before that. But I think about the epic comeback at Northlands with Kelly Buchberger getting the overtime winner after they were down 3-0, sort of similar to what happened to them in 2017, where they were on the losing end of that. But in '97, the Oilers scored 3 goals late in the game to tie it up 3-3 and then ended up getting the overtime winner. Another one would be Mike Comrie's OT winner in April of 2001. I believe it was Game 3 of the first round, where Ryan Smith kind of fanned on a passing attempt, but the puck just came from behind the net and squirted out into the slot, and Comrie was able to bang it home in the crease. And another one that I remember, I was 14 at the time, was in 2003, and Radek Dvorak took the puck from end to end and scored just a highlight reel goal to give the Oilers a 2-1 series lead in Game 3 against Dallas. And although Dallas ended up winning the next 3 games straight to take the series, that was a memorable goal for me.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back on YouTube and rewatch some of these.
Yeah, it's. I think a lot of Oilers fans will and probably are going to be doing that over the next couple days, especially leading up to this upcoming series. And we'll get back to that now. Jay, when you look at these two teams on paper, where do you give the Oilers the advantage, and in what areas do you give the Stars the edge?
Well, obviously, you got to give the Oilers the edge on the special teams. I don't believe Dallas's penalty kill has been great, albeit they've faced some really tough teams in Colorado and Las Vegas. But I think they're only running at I want to say
it's a 69.2 PK. It's the worst among the 4 remaining teams.
There you go. So going up against the Oilers, power play, that's might be some trouble for them. The Oilers, I think it's easy to say that their top 6 is the best top 6 in the league, but Dallas's top 12 overall is better than Edmonton's, and you'd be lying to yourself if you said different. And obviously, got to give the goaltending to the Stars. But, Ottinger, he can get a little shaky at times. And, fingers crossed, he finds his yips and, a couple soft ones get in.
Well, and, you look at these two teams. I mean, I can't say that there's one position that I would give the Oilers the advantage in. Dallas, their forwards are better. Their defense is better. Their goaltender is better. But the Oilers' top-end players are better than Dallas's top-end players. So that's where it's really going to come down to. I think that despite this team improving throughout the lineup over the past few years, this is going to be a series where McDavid and Draisaitl are really going to be relied on to carry the boat and get this team over the hump. And I mean, these are legacy-type players. These are players who are future Hall of Famers. McDavid is an all-time great. He'll be at very least a top 5 player of all time. Draisaitl probably a top 20 player all time by the time his career is done. So for these guys to have these kind of moments, a chance to get your team to the Stanley Cup final, I have a feeling that they are going to rise to the occasion. And that doesn't mean that they can't expect contributions from throughout the lineups. But it's like you said, if you had to look at Dallas's 3rd and 4th line, it would be better than Edmonton's 3rd and 4th line. As good as Edmonton's defense has been, and we talked about the addition of Ekholm and Bouchard reaching a new level, and even Nurse and Desharnais as a new pairing looking pretty good together, it still isn't at the level of what the Stars are at. So you're going to have to rely on the fact that Edmonton's 2 best players are better than anyone on the Stars. And if they can come through and have a huge series, then that gives the Oilers a big advantage.
Legends are made in the NHL playoffs, and you know what? McDavid and Draisaitl, they have the opportunity to be legends, and they know that, and they're going to be driven by that. They want to go down in history as Cup winners. Well, here's where you do it.
And I've always said that the first time that McDavid and Draisaitl get to a Stanley Cup final, I don't think they're going to let that opportunity slip away, but they still have to get to that Stanley Cup final. And this is only the second time that they've been this far in the playoffs. It's McDavid's 9th season. It's Draisaitl's 10th season. And the last time they made it to a conference final, they didn't win a single game. So they're going to have to be a lot better this time around. And really, I would put zero blame on those two. Those two guys did everything they could in 2022. Unfortunately, they just ran into a juggernaut of a team in the Colorado Avalanche, and I don't think anyone was going to be able to stop them that year. So not much the Oilers could do there, but this year, even though Dallas is a very deep team, I don't think they're quite at the level of the Avs were 2 years ago. So the Oilers being a better team than they were then, and Dallas being not quite the team that the Avs were 2 years ago, I think it should be more of an evenly matched series than people think.
For sure. It's definitely not going to be a sweep. I'm not going to sit here and say I think the Oilers will win this series. I hope they do, but it's going to be a long series. It's going to be a long, hard fought series. And I just hope that, you hear little whispers of a bit of a bug going through the Oilers room. You hear Ekholm was sick and McDavid, you could just hear it in his voice, post game 7. There's something wrong there, and I read or listened to something today where the bug is slowly working its way out of the room, and man, is that good timing.
I mean, if you think about it, we've made it through an entire podcast and have hardly talked about McDavid. And for anyone who's listened to my shows in the past knows that that's very rare for that to happen. So, and look, he had 9 points in 7 games in the series against the Canucks. That's very good. It's over a point per game. But by McDavid's extremely high standards, people are going to say, well, he had a bit of a down series. And I mean, he was 1 point away from breaking an NHL record of being the first player to ever record double digits in points in 4 consecutive playoff series. And I was really hoping he was going to get one in Game 7 against the Canucks. Ultimately didn't, but they still won, so that's all that matters. I think that if I'm looking at this series, I mean, we know that the experts are all picking the Dallas Stars, or most are. The Oilers are going to be considerable underdogs in this series. But for the Oilers to win, I think it hinges, like I said, as I've already kind of touched on, McDavid and Draisaitl having to be otherworldly and the power play needing to get back to where it was, being over 40% again, which is a tall ask, but I mean, it's something that they've done in the past. And for Dallas's power or penalty kill to be as weak as it's been so far, that's an area where the Oilers really need to exploit. And if they can get their power play running at a pretty good clip again, where it's hovering around 50% as it was through the first 2 rounds, then I think that there's a good chance that that could be a difference maker in the series.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about something earlier today. It seems like it's been a long time since we've seen one of those McDavid goals that makes you just jump out of your seat.
Yeah.
And
I mean, he's only scored 2 goals in the playoffs so far, and both of them have come on the road. But you're right. I mean, he still had 132 points this year. I think part of it is I don't know if he's fully healed from that oblique injury back in the fall. Because if you look at it, he hasn't shot the puck nearly as much as he did a year ago. And I know that he did hit 100 assists this year, and it seemed that playmaking was more of a focus for him. But I just think that there's something that he's going to need the whole offseason to rest up. And I wouldn't be surprised if he bounces back with 60 goals again next season. I'm going to already predict him to get 50 even before the season's even started. But I think that where he's at right now, that might be having a factor in why we haven't seen maybe as many those dazzling goals this year.
Absolutely. And just hopefully he can, squeak 1 or 2 of those in this series.
I mean, he can still dangle through guys and move at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So that's going to be where he's going to make those plays happen. And I don't think it's going to be one where he's, rifling a shot top corner from the circle or anything. But going up against an elite goalie like Ottinger, if he can get him moving side to side and try to dangle him for 1 or 2, that'd be great to see.
No, for sure.
And Jay, who do you think wins this series and in how many games?
I'm going to put my Homer hat on right now. It's going to be Oilers in 7, and it's going to be a battle.
Oilers in 7. Okay, you know what? I'm also going to say Oilers in 7. I was originally going to say Oilers in 6. I thought about it today, ended up changing it to Oilers in 7. I want to ask, is there anything else that you can make a prediction for the series? Not to put you on the spot or anything, but something that you either want to see or think that you'll see other than what we've talked about so far.
That's a good question.
Do you want to? We've seen the defensemen chip in here. They scored 2 goals last game. Is there a player that you want to see step up throughout the lineup? Could you see Corey Perry getting back in it? Anything like that?
It was really nice to see. Actually, I will say this: I really liked what Sam Carrick brought. Okay. And I really hope that, he finds a way to stick into this series, because I really, he was a lot of good plays, smart plays, simple plays, and a lot of physicality. And, in a 7-game series, you're going to need that. I hope Perry gets in. But, if it takes him a couple games to kind of watch, not that he needs to learn anything more, but, maybe just to give his body a little bit.
I was going to say that, he just turned 39 the other day. He's pretty old for a professional athlete. So if he gets into a game, you'd like to think, this is a winner, right? This is a guy who's been to 4 Stanley Cup finals. He's won a cup with Anaheim back in 2007. And he's no stranger to going on these deep runs. And I think the fact that he'd be going up against his former team in Dallas, I feel like he would love to get in there and stir things up.
He wants to be the worm. And, against His old team. That's definitely would be interesting to watch. Because
I'm going to hope Perry gets in there and he scores a goal in this series, and hopefully a big goal. That was actually something I thought before this playoff run. I didn't know when it was going to come, but I said Corey Perry is going to score a big goal in the playoffs.
And if not, we'll always have that picture of him holding his stick out, preventing.
Yes, sir.
If that's the least we get, I'll take it.
That's a pretty hilarious Corey Perry moment too. It's so fitting that he did that.
Absolutely.
Did it take you a while to make the adjustment of going from a player that you despised for so many years to liking the guy when he first put on an Oilers jersey, or was the switch pretty immediate for you?
It was pretty immediate. In my adult life and your adult life, or pretty much your life, we've never experienced an Oilers Stanley Cup. And honestly, I don't care who it is. I'm not going to throw any names out there because I'll probably just say someone totally despicable and get people mad at me. But I don't care who's on the team. I want to see an Oilers Stanley Cup in my lifetime. And right now is the best chance the next 3-4 years. If not, we might not.
All these players are at their prime, right? I mean, you want to do it while McDavid and Draisaitl are at this level.
Sure. And, if we don't see it in the next, 3 to 4 years, I don't know if we're ever going to see it.
It's too hard for me to look down the line and say, what the roster will look like a decade from now or anything like that. But obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl are only at this level for so long, and you want to have one of these incredible years where they're at the top of the scoring race for those years to end in a championship as well. So I'm hopeful that that's going to happen.
How many times where you have players at this level that don't cash in?
Yeah, it's been 34 years since the Oilers have won a Stanley Cup. I was a year and a half old when they won in 1990. I know you were a little older than that, so you can remember it. I can't. But now in 2006, I was 17. And that is still the most fun I've ever had watching playoff hockey in my life. A close second would be 2 years ago in the playoffs when the Oilers knocked off the Flames in the second round, went to the conference final. This is still pretty close right up there as well. And just waiting for one of these years to have a happy ending.
2006 was really fun because it was kind of unexpected. That one kind of out of nowhere.
The most as you can say that the Oilers are underdogs going into this series against Dallas, they will never be as big of underdogs as they were going up against the President's Trophy winning Detroit Red Wings in the first round in 2006. The Oilers finished 29 points behind the Red Wings that year, and they beat them in 6 games. So if anyone says it's impossible that the Oilers can beat the Stars this year, I say nothing is impossible in the playoffs.
Yeah, and we had a lot of good house parties that year.
I can imagine. And the thing is that sometimes what you need to go on a run like that is just having a hot goaltender at the right time. And for 2 months, Dwayne Rollison was the best goalie in the league, and that got the Oilers to where they were. And right now they're going up against Ottinger, who is arguably right up there as a top 3 goalie in the league. So they have the advantage in that category. But if the Oilers can somehow get to him, and they do have the weapons, you can say that the Oilers haven't faced a goalie as daunting as Ottinger so far. But the Oilers might even have more offensive power than any of the teams that the Avs have faced so far. The Stars have played so far. The Avs would be close, right? But I still think that when the Oilers are at their firing on all cylinders, I think that they're the best offensive team in the league.
Yeah, the Avs, you could probably call the Oilers 1A, and as far as top end talent, and then maybe the Avs
would be right behind them, right? I mean,
right. It's close, but they're not quite there.
Yeah, and I look at McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen. I mean, just their top 3 players right there. That's a pretty incredible top 3. McDavid and Draisaitl would obviously be 1 and 2 for the Oilers, and pick whoever you want for the third guy. They don't have maybe the most definitive top 3. You might even say that Bouchard is in there now, even over Nugent Hopkins or Hyman or any of those other top forwards. But Like I said, we know what kind of offensive firepower the Oilers have, and that's how they're going to win this series. The Oilers aren't going to win this series with a bunch of 2-1 games. They're going to need the top guys to be producing a lot of points. And like I said, for McDavid to have 9 points in 7 games against the Stars, he's going to need to be closer to what he was against the Kings when he had 12 points in 5 games.
No, Skinner needs to be good. There's
Skinner
no doubt.
needs to be good. Skinner, and maybe he doesn't even need to outplay Ottinger, but the Oilers forwards need to outplay Dallas's forwards, and that's going to be a fun battle. I can't wait for it to get started tomorrow night. And I just want to say again, Jay, thanks for so much for being on the show tonight. It's been great to talk to you. Where can people follow you?
You can follow me at Oil City Dynasty on Twitter. I refuse to call it X.
Yeah, I don't think anyone that I've talked to in here will call it X. We're all going to stick with calling it Twitter, and that probably won't change. And you can also follow me at Eric J. Friesen. You can follow this podcast at 99 Forever Pod. And everyone, please go give Jay a follow. Jay, so great talking to you. We'll do this again sometime.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
All right. So for Jay from Oil City Dynasty, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever Podcast. We're out.